All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast-to-coast radio show all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh, is here in Amsterdam today at the One Conference with OutSystems with Tiago Azevedo. And Tiago, I have to say, watching this show all day has been remarkable. I've been a fan of low code for quite some time. I actually coded myself about 45 years ago when the Commodore 64 came out, and I wrote a couple programs in BASIC. So I've been there.
So I started
Is it really?
not with the Commodore, but with the ZX Spectrum, if you recall, as well. I'm
Okay.
not sure how that was like worldwide, but it was quite common in Europe at least.
Okay. Or the trash
I was
80s,
12.
as we called it, the TRS 80. Remember that one?
Yeah.
That was the earliest ones. I mean, it goes a long, long way back. But these days, low code is a whole category now, of course. And the analyst world, they focus on that. And you folks have been a pioneer in that space. And I have to say, watching the demo today was amazing. The fact
Thank
that you
you.
could load a requirements document into this system and have it read through the document, build out the sort of structure or the skeleton of an application and start that whole process. That's crazy. What I mean, how did you guys do that?
Well, this is the advent of generative AI coming along. A lot of the capabilities were already sort of built into the product. As you heard probably on our executive panel, my colleague Andy mentioning, we've started with AI around 2018, so about 6, 7 years ago. And so a lot of those capabilities were already inside. What generative AI brought into it is the ability of the natural language processing.
Mm-hmm.
So you can now interpret the prompts, which in the demo you saw came in the format of requirements, business requirements or specification, and translate that into specific components of an application. And that's the beauty of it. So you can correlate unstructured information that you see on a business requirement specification into structured information, which are database tables and logic and
Right.
modules and fields, etc.
Right. And that's remarkable because it greases the tracks to getting into production. And many people in the development world know that just getting started is difficult because you're staring at a screen, it's a blank screen, like, oh my goodness, how do I get this rolling? To be able to take a requirements document and just load it into the system and have 80% of that startup process done for you is great
Yeah, it's amazing.
because one of my soapbox topics is morale, and this boosts developer morale because no one wants to do the boring, tedious stuff. They want to do the fun stuff, the interesting stuff. When you can kind of get rolling, your juices are flowing. That's where you want to get, and this process helps you just fast track that side of it, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, if you can correlate with specifically even younger generations, we live in the world of the instant gratification. So that's like more instant than you saw there with computer science. I
Right.
don't think it has ever been imagined before.
That's very interesting. And I want to walk through the durability because low code, I've always believed, is very powerful. But as a friend of mine once said, a human can always write tighter code than a machine. But you can go in and adjust the code, right? I mean, low code isn't no code, so you can go in and check things out. I- And I think I even heard some commentary today on the stage about being able to put guardrails in and watch out for unnecessary complexity. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit under the covers? How is this low code platform able to deliver a robust experience and avoid having too much code?
Well, it's Paulo mentioned a kind of like a very important word in there, which is abstraction,
Mm-hmm.
which has been there in computer science forever. So what that creates is an abstraction between the detail of how the different code components are assembled together to provide that result, and actually the vision or the business requirements themselves. What you saw in that demo, which I think is a huge differentiator, is that you didn't see snippets of code that then you, as a developer, were asked to combine themselves. You saw a whole application end to end written in a format which is our own language, OutSystems language that is low code, very graphical. You saw the application end to end and you were able to understand very well the different components that constitute that application, which is very different from seeing bits and snippets, as they call it, of code being generated by the likes of Copilot, etc., that then a very skilled developer has to combine together.
Right.
So, and we, ever since then once you get there, it's all that has always been there in the OutSystems platform. We are so the code is generated in standard technologies like .NET, etc. And we have always been, as a kind of company made by the majority of computer science, even at the executive level, as you saw on that panel, we are very proud of generating good code, safe code that adheres to the highest level of standards. So in a nutshell, creating that abstraction for the developer, him or themselves, when they input the specifications into the platform.
That's very interesting. And once an application is built and running, does your AI also have the capacity to monitor how the application is going, to if there are bugs, to identify that and raise alerts about that, or how does that work?
Yeah, it follows the whole life cycle that you saw, that infinity symbol. So what it does is it goes through design, development, testing, deployment, and then maintenance, as you reiterate based on whatever you find and measure and learn from it, and you incorporate it back again to the same cycle. So we try to give a very short, small example of something that was missing and that was then reincorporated. And that one that if you recall on the demo, there was a missing state on the specification, and the model was able to identify and incorporate it itself. So those are the kind of things, of course, that if you miss, let's not, I always like to use the example of writing. And you can also I could go to ChatGPT and ask him to write me about stuff. I'll miss a lot of context in that prompt for sure that you wouldn't miss because of our backgrounds and professions. But and so and the output of whatever I asked it to do would be different than yours. But this is where the human in the loop with the highest skills is so important, because that's why that highly skilled developer is going to make that application that he generated so fast, I would say perfect to his use case or to their use case, because that developer will incorporate the details that were not put on the prompt, or they could iterate on the prompt until they get there, or they could just go and add them themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That's very interesting. And, I've found, and I've believed for a while now, that most of the value we get from AI will manifest in the form of suggestions. And I've seen this for a while now. Google 2.5 years ago, in your Gmail, if you're typing or doing something, I would notice that it would automatically surface emails I had not responded to and say, hey, do you think you should respond to this? And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. Like, how did you know? Now it went away. I'm not sure why it went away. Google is a big company, and
I think it comes back every now and again. It's something like, oh, you not responded this. It was 5 days ago. You didn't get a response, something like that.
Right. And LinkedIn does that too. So it's interesting, and I think that's very valuable because it's still up to the human to make the decision, but it's helping you by reminding you of things. And is that a big part of your philosophy around AI in the OutSystems platform as well, that it's going to be there scanning, looking for gaps, looking for holes, looking for
Consistency.
patterns that are not complete, and then making recommendations. Is that about right?
Yeah. So and the platform would learn with more and more data that will be on top of it. So
Right. Well, I mean, that also is a very interesting part of the equation here, that it learns over time. And before we started this show, you were talking about Gong and how it's very good with its transcripts. I think to myself that the summarization power of these large language models is really
is
impressive.
impressive.
It's probably the best that I've
So
seen. What do you
as
think?
an example, absolutely. So I mentioned the transcript because the experience that we have is when we are authorized to record a call, and we have the transcript. We have That's one of the use cases that we have applied generative AI to. So we read that transcript and we break it down to the information that is relevant for us, and we register that in a structured format in our Salesforce database, assigned to the opportunity.
Well,
So it's like I was talking with you, like what were your pain points? Like what metrics are relevant for you in the use case you're trying to do? What is actually that use case? And that information, which would make an SDR or an account executive to take notes and
yeah,
then write
right.
them down,
Right.
it's available 15 minutes after the call.
That's crazy. And then you can monitor that. So what we're changing
And the
is
human only goes and says, "Yeah, that's about right. That's about."
right.
So we actually played around with it, and so one of our best account executives, Alex, when we were trying it out with him, and by the way, and then even suggests a follow-up email to be
Right.
sent to the
Right.
customer,
Right.
and he sent that to the customer, and as a summary of the call, and the customer said, "That's about right, Alex. Thank you."
Wow.
So he said it was about 97% accurate. So he had to kind of
Yeah.
fiddle with a paragraph or two, and that was it.
And here's where I get back to these reminders
These
that the
things
AI
are
gives you.
available. So these are the AI agents that Cezanne were doing on the demo, incorporating them on the workflow as well.
Right.
That the combination of those two things inside a product and a platform, to me as a CIO, and I mean it's not just my own opinion, this is what I'm gathering amongst the CIO community, is the platform that people have been asking and are waiting to help them overcome this challenge.
Right. Well, because it reminds you of things and it won't forget. Like that's the
Absolutely.
nice thing. Human beings, we forget stuff, we get distracted, someone calls us, and it'll be like, bing, did you get back to Alex on that sales opportunity? Oh gosh, no, I didn't. And then you go ahead and you do it. And if
Absolutely.
if the organization using the technology allows access to email and phone and these other channels like Slack, for example, you can pull it all together and see exactly what's happening, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
Yeah. And then you apply a safe policy on top of it and you do it for the greater good, which is in this case the success of the company and nothing else.
Right. Right. And to your point, you can also put guardrails in. So policies. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when data governance was just a fantasy in the mind of some executive somewhere because you just had to hope that people read the policy and adhere to the policy. Now, with technologies like Gong and like OutSystems, you can actually have the AI enforce the policies,
Yeah.
right?
And and even if the AI doesn't necessarily enforce, we as humans, we enforce the policy. So at the current time, one of part of our AI policy is to not have automated decision making.
Hmm.
So meaning that we don't we suggest, but we allow either the customer or an internal person to make a decision on top of that information. So we don't, it's not like we'd have agents that automatically do things. The world of the AI agents is evolving, and we might get to a point where if we find that that decision is safe, we'll allow it. But obviously, is an important component right now, depending on the kind of the task that you're automating.
Yeah, and I have a lot of questions around AI agents too, and mostly we only have a couple minutes left in this segment, but mostly I'm interested in governance and in how you track the behavior of an agent. Is it a traditional log file that gets spun out from the things that the agent did, or how can you then track what the agent did?
So we track the today there's a lot of there's a dialogue with the agent. So we track the answer that the agent gave. We track where, in what kind of knowledge did the agent base its answer on.
Interesting.
And so as an example, so one of the things we launched recently is, we call it MyOS from OutSystems. And it's literally an agent that overlays on top of many different applications, at the time being in Salesforce and Workday, and it's context sensitive. So if you would ask it a question regarding an opportunity in Salesforce, it will give you an answer regarding that opportunity. So basically, usually it's about insights about that customer prospect, and how everything we know about our own product is able to be correlated with that information.
Right.
So in order to be able to for us to pitch the right thing. When it's about HR policies, it'll give you an answer about what the HR policy is. We are able to identify what was the answer that was given to the person, what part, what even segment of the knowledge base in terms of HR policy was used to answer that question. And we ask for feedback, whether the person like thumbs up or thumbs down. So we will know, this helps us perfect our content, which is our knowledge of everything we know about policy, like HR policies inside OutSystems. And we use that to feedback and go and perfect and make it more specific, less ambiguous, and so on and so forth.
That is just amazing. So you're seeing real-time understanding of policy, application of rules, and you're capturing what is decided upon after that. We'll be right back, folks. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to InsideAnalysis. All right. Wow. That was great. You want to do one more segment?
Up to you.
15. This one's like 15 and a half minutes. So hold on. Let me reload this guy. There we go. That's amazing. I mean, it really is. It's almost frightening. I'm curious about like how much.
Don't fear it, please. I think, do you know what? It's so, it's one of, I mean, we can talk about it. It's like that managing people through this change is really hard. And I think we talk a lot about the technology, but as you can see, it's not the problem anymore. It's the humans that are in between that create the problem.
Okay, let's just be quiet for 1 second. All right, folks, back here on InsideAnalysis, talking to Tiago Azevedo of OutSystems about this remarkable transformation that we're all going through in the world of technology, in the world of business. And it's really quite fascinating. I asked myself, how are people going to manage to get through this as human beings? And that's an interesting question. I think the key is to recognize that all this information is there to help us make better decisions. We still have to deliver products and do things. That's not going to change, but the management of it is going to be so much more transparent and visible, which is great for management, right? For executives, when you can see at scale what's happening in your organization. For example, figure out who the really good salespeople are. Well, why are they good? Let's examine their calls. Let's take a look at the things that they mentioned. Oh, maybe it's the cadence of their questions, or maybe it's which questions they ask, or maybe it's how they do things. Point is, you can learn best practices these days really better than we've ever been able to do and map that directly to results. And that's where we should be headed in terms of management practice, right? Is really taking to heart the insights we're getting from the machines and applying that to the real world.
Yeah. And that, it's funny you touch on that topic, because it's something that we've been doing lately. I mean, we sort of call it like the win-loss analysis, which is exactly try to understand what are the gaps that need to be addressed from an operation perspective. Like, what are our salespeople missing out when they have contact with the customer? What are the challenges that they face that they're not able to deal with? How can we better equip them to handle those situations? And we've been able to embed this thing so seamlessly into the systems that they already have. I mean, I won't be able to show you right now, but we have a concept that we call overlay. Like we literally we wanted to eliminate any resistance of how we deploy generative AI agents into the applications. So people, for example, in the sales department, people will be like, no, like sales reps, they have Salesforce. That's where they sit all day, and that's where they register the opportunities and so on. So please don't make any other application. Said, no problem. I can put it right on top of it. So they'll have a screen. There's a little thingy with the kind of the AI little stars that says need help.
Right.
They press it, and there's like a curtain that comes on part of the screen with the insights about that opportunity that is relevant for them to
Interesting.
address calls
Interesting.
with the customer.
Yeah, and that's also very interesting too. So just as a sort of sidebar here, I noticed a few years ago, and it's really starting to take off now, what I think is a very clever direction for information technology, which is to embed within existing applications, or as you
Yes,
suggest, to overlay, because people don't want to bounce from one application to
correct.
another to
True.
another. It's
True. And I
discordant.
respect that.
Right. And so now to weave that in very cleverly is very, I think, very astute. And that's what you're doing with this little overlay, right?
Yeah. And that, so, and the second level of sort of like analysis or augmentation there is that, so there's another topic that is becoming prominent in the discussion of like the evolution of generative AI and software vendors, etc. And I think we have a unique selling point, which is um, AI is a brain, and these large language models have been trained on general information that's available on the web. And then companies like us augmented, that's why it's called RAG, Retrieval Augmented
Right.
Generation,
Right.
with knowledge from our own companies that's unique to us. It's like I told you about our HR policies or our product marketing information or our sometimes or the transcript of a call, etc., etc. It's several sources. The last time we count on this thing I was telling you, I think it was about 8 or 9 different sources of information. Excuse me. That information is all fed into the AI brain,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what makes it artificially intelligent.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of software vendors that act on, and we mentioned Gong, I could Zoom, Microsoft, Salesforce, Oracle, whatever. They usually they get better and better in the knowledge inside their domain. So let's say Salesforce is within the CRM. But what about the 8, 9, 10 different sources that I just told you about? Some analytical, some operational, some unstructured, some structured that I get. So even with my COO, when we started this whole process, he said, do you know, there's all these different applications that my reps have to go to collect information about the customer. I want all of that inside this thing now. And
Right.
he was actually discussing with me, like, oh, is it in the database? I said, that's for me to design. Don't worry. I know we're both computer science engineers, but your job is to sell, mine is to set up the solutions for
That's
you.
funny.
And the reality is the these software as a service vendors are limited to their environment
Mm-hmm.
because no one their packages, right, and it's like no one starts to go into the other people field It's like the CRM doesn't go into the ERP and vice
Right.
versa and so
Right.
on. We can sit on top of all that, combine all that knowledge, and now with the ability of doing it in any way, it could be an API, could be an overlay, could be a new application, you name it,
Right.
we can deploy that level of intelligence on top of everything.
Wow.
And
That's
that's, to me, groundbreaking. We use internal language, literally internal. It's not even productized to be so we call it the content stack. So it's almost like, I like the analogy of volumes on an encyclopedia.
mm-hmm.
So each volume is a part of the knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you read maths, then you read history, then you read this, and your intelligence becomes wider and bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can answer different questions. The same thing with an AI system.
That's very interesting. And we chatted earlier today, and maybe we can dig into this in the next segment, but what I call old IT versus new IT.
Mhm.
And old IT, I would argue, is imperative in terms of the programming. It's very much an inside out process. It's very manually intensive. It requires a lot of people to go and manually build out component parts of some sort of architecture. Whereas new IT, I think, is more outside in, it is more declarative in nature, and it is faster and more generative. And to your point, if you can absorb all of this, and that's where OutSystems is really helping its customers, if you can absorb data from the ERP, from the CRM, from the Salesforce, and then infuse that with the recommendations. I mean, that they came up with data warehousing because you couldn't analyze data in an ERP effectively or very quickly. Now you kind of can, right? What do you think about that?
So it's funny you mentioning that because it created a problem, a good problem, but a problem for us because the comment now is like, you're going too fast. You're going too fast. So slow down, like please. And this is too much.
Right.
Why? Because just even as a proof of concept, I showed, you know, this is what I know about Eric. And I know that he's been browsing about this information on our website. I know that he's enterprise architect and that he is in charge of this area, the digital transformation inside his company, which, by the way, is in an insurance industry and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, I'll tell you, look, as a sales rep, these are the relevant customer stories that you need to talk about. This is the relevance in terms of product positioning for Eric and so on and so forth. And they're like, I don't even know where that came from. It's like, exactly. Now let me show you the basic information with all these 7, 8, 9 different sources. And actually, we now say how the model correlated that with our information. So I
Wow.
told you these customer success stories because you are from the same industry as all these other clients. I said I recommended this use case for you because as the head of development, that is the most common use case that these companies of the same size of yours are looking for. And so I can even tell them why it correlates. So it's not like one of those, oh, the AI answered something and I don't know what it was.
Right.
We show them, but it has been, as they said, overwhelming. So they have to like strip it down to like step by step because it was going too fast.
Wow.
And we did that in 1 week.
I mean, the pace of innovation that we're seeing now is remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to, just as human beings, take a deep breath and then reevaluate and take a look at this and understand it's a new source of information. Really, it's closing the loop on analysis, right? On insight and all these feeds. I think that and this is probably where a low code platform like OutSystems will really shine, because you're handling a lot of that stuff for your clients. So they don't need to build out connectors and do all these different
No, no, no,
things,
no.
right? That's the
So,
point, is that
so
you do that for them.
some I'm not sure if you were able to watch the panel that I was moderating, but one of the customers said, I don't, sometimes I consider these things that we build like they're quite simple, but they generate a lot of value. It's the same thing here. We like everything, we built a platform that integrates with almost anything. And now with GenAI, literally structured, unstructured, analytical, operational, APIs, databases, other systems, you name it. Because that's how you can actually address digital transformation. You either do everything on your own, or if you reuse, like you already have an ERP or a CRM, etc., you want to connect those things all together. And so you have to have the agility, which another word you heard today, and the flexibility to connect all those different things together. That's why we like one of the components of platform is data fabric. Data fabric is just a mesh of the data that you have inside your company, which you then combine in an application. And the thing is, people might ask, what is this used for? But the reality is, as an example, an insurance customer service rep might have to be switching between 5 different applications to serve one customer's request. Now imagine if you built one single front end that interfaces them all and shows everything on
Right,
one screen.
right,
That's where the benefit lies to
right.
from. But so for us, the ability to do all these integrations, it actually like it feels like very easy, but like I can understand that for a lot of people might be huge problems, but we make that very consumable for them.
Right. That's very interesting, and I think it's very encouraging the way you're describing this, because at the end of the day, people just need to get stuff done. If you're a salesperson, you got to sell. If you're a marketer, you have to create demand. You have to create leads. You have to deliver leads. If you're a writer, you have to write stuff. And writing, by the way, these Gen AI engines are pretty good at the basics. Now, I will say they are really consensus engines, but they're getting more and more fine-grained, I suppose. But I think it's encouraging that OutSystems, again, has this platform, and you can handle a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff for your clients, so you can deliver that one screen where they can see things. And it'll, I mean, think about it. Even if you have sentiment analysis on the call, it can be like, ding, this client is fading away from you. Maybe suggest that you connect again
Exactly.
tomorrow. I mean, that's where we're headed, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's a lot of these companies are faced with same challenges that I am faced, that we are faced, which is there is a pressure to uh, grow in value.
Right,
That pressure comes from the market, sometimes shareholders, investors. Um, it's part of the economy,
right.
and that pressure makes a lot of business people come along with ideas of how to generate that value. Those ideas have to be implemented. A lot of the times, technology can be an enabler or just or actually a setter of those opportunities. And the truth is, people that take same job as I do have to struggle with that. So we need to give them the tools for them to be able to address those challenges in a way that they can control the anxiety and the challenge itself. And we heard a number of different stories today exactly about that. So that's where it comes from.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's all coming together very quickly, but take a deep breath. It's there to help you. It's going to help you get through the next day and find the next client. But folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back. You are listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. What a long day it's been. Yours truly flew from Pittsburgh over to Amsterdam. And now we're here at the end of the day talking to Tiago Azevedo of OutSystems, the Chief Information Officer here. And when I think about this confluence of technologies, and that's really what we're talking about, is a confluence of all these different technologies, because it was all separate. I think that as time goes by, obviously Salesforce is going to survive, Google is going to survive, these different companies are going to survive, but really the end user just wants stuff to work. So from that perspective, that's where I think a low-code platform like OutSystems is very well positioned because again, you can handle a lot of the integration work with these other point systems and databases and APIs and all that stuff, and then just deliver to the end user what they need to get their job done. I think that because you've got 20 plus years of experience doing this, I mean, this is a robust platform
I don't, but
that
you're going to tell me now that I don't look like I'm the adult.
I guess it's not that long, but it's been a while now. You've got this you have an existing client base. Obviously, you're growing that client base. I think that low code is going to be very prominent in the future for a lot of reasons, and those are some that I just threw out there. What do you think?
I think you are seeing it very well. So a lot of these other companies and vendors that you talked about, they operate in a specific segment, which is they address a domain of an architecture, of an enterprise architecture, like ERPs or CRMs or other things like that. So the reality is the secret sauce on on a company is the integration, because processes start in one part of the company and sometimes they can flow through many different parts of the company, and a lot of the times different people use different systems depending on what they're doing.
Right.
And data has to flow across those systems. The second thing is sometimes that flow can be done like just like behind the scenes, but also a lot of the times there's complements for different processes that you have to layer other experiences on top of those other systems. And that's where OutSystems plays its best. So you can either build the core system of a company, like an insurance company, a banking. You heard so many examples today from different industries, Toyota, KeyBank, Vopak, and all of the sorts. So different examples like that, as much as you can also complement other systems you have in your architecture.
Right.
You literally you address mission critical serious applications with OutSystems.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up another good point. And, as we look at the market and I'm reading the news about layoffs and Walgreens is closing 1,200 stores and Intel's laying off people, Dell is laying off thousands of people. And these are straws in the wind about the market. So organizations are tightening, they're buttoning down, they're trying to figure out what is necessary, what is superfluous, what can we get rid of. And I think that this Gen AI stuff is coming just in the nick of time, quite frankly,
Absolutely.
to pull this stuff together such that you don't need to spend all the money on all these different systems. Now, having said that, it's difficult to sunset applications in the enterprise. I'm sure you know that as a CIO. It's always difficult to kill any application.
The word legacy appears for some reason.
That's right. Well, I'll tell you one of my funniest comments I ever heard on our shows. I asked our guests, what is the definition of a legacy system? And one guy said, any system in production.
Exactly.
Right?
It becomes legacy as soon as you deploy it.
As soon as it's deployed, it's a legacy system. But seriously, I think that this is kind of coming together. And again, it does, I think, bode well for a low code platform because again, you're handling the execution under the covers and yet allowing your customers to do their own bespoke things, right?
Of course. There is a level of requirements that usually can be addressed by some of these packages if you don't make the decision of actually building it on your own. You were hearing Benfica today on the stadium saying, he said, we have very specific use cases, like we want people to share the ticket, we want them to sell the ticket in the aftermarket, and so on.
Right.
Sometimes those things don't exist in these packages, so you have to build them on your own. The other thing, to be honest with you, which I like it very much, this approach is you can't buy yourself into innovation.
Hmm.
You can't buy your ticket into innovation.
Right.
You have if you want to innovate, you're not going to use something that includes all the standard practices that everybody else does
Right.
by definition.
Interesting.
So you and companies, that pressure I was telling you about, that companies are facing, you face competition coming from every different angle. You have to do something different to be unique, to your customers. Like a huge customer of ours in the Philippines, Union Bank, during COVID and the pandemic, they stole a lot of customers from their competition because all their processes were digital,
Wow.
including check deposits, which to me, I found it fascinating. You
Right.
take a picture with your mobile phone and yeah,
Yeah.
the money's on your account.
Right.
It's like, how cool is that? And but the reality is that's how you address. So um, customers end up falling in a situation where they have to be unique at some sort, if not the
Interesting.
whole business, at least part of their business.
Right. Well, and I loved that Paolo's first comment right out of the gate for the keynote today was everybody is an innovator. I
Exactly.
thought that was brilliant because it respects the fact that, you know what? Everyone is an innovator. Every human being innovates in some way. The
Absolutely.
key is to map that innovative spirit to a business model, to a process, to a customer interaction or whatever. But I love that you have this deep respect imbued in the organization that guess what? Everyone is an innovator, right?
Yeah, and listen, the beginning of my career, like about half of the time in my career, I was a consultant, and we used to implement a lot of software packages. And what did we tell every customer? If you don't want to mess around, just follow the business practice. Don't customize it too much.
Right.
What does that tell you? Are you innovating anything? No,
No, that's
exactly.
right.
So the reality is that could have worked when companies were kind of catching up. Right now, nobody's catching up. People are actually literally trying to win out
Right.
there in the market.
Right.
And for that, you need to be an innovator. And we have to give you the tools to be for you to be able to innovate. And I think that's where OutSystems plays a really important role.
Yeah, that's very interesting stuff. I guess in the final couple minutes we have here, I'll throw an interesting observation I had at you. I remember watching these large language models when they first came out and thinking to myself, wow, this is very, very interesting. And I knew immediately they could also not just write in English and French, but in C sharp and in Java, in other words, programming languages. Well, when I think about system to system, like machines talking to each other, it's not as complex as human language. So they should be good at being able to identify patterns in machines talking to each other and optimize all of that. Is that about right?
Yeah, they can definitely help with handling that level of integration without creating ambiguity. But I mean, to be honest, that's where kind of like the new era that we are now addressing with the having different agents, that's what they call it, which is an AI
Right,
application,
right,
talking to one another and combined doing this the role of or part of a specific job.
right,
And when you create several agents that interact together, you also sort of partition the problem in different pieces.
right,
So you just take yet another composable approach to
right,
software development, this
right.
time with AI agents.
Interesting. And I think that's like Mistral, right? Does this mixture of experts, and they kind of focused on having kind of like you're describing, having multiple discrete agents doing different things, and then you have to orchestrate those,
Absolutely.
right? But that's the magic is having these different agents who specialize in what they do best,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Wow.
It's one step, a big one towards automation.
Yeah. And automation, let's face it, all software automates something. That's why you get software to automate either
Correct.
word processing or analytics or IoT or whatever. I think the bottom line is that we are entering this new, very interesting age. It's still going to require people. People are still going to have to do their jobs. They're still going to have to watch things and monitor things and manage things. But anytime a machine can do a job better than a person, let the machine do the job. Well, folks, look these gentlemen up online. This has been a wonderful conversation. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.